Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. I have a quick project for the home today. You know fitted sheets, when you try and put them into the bed and you've always got to pull really tightly to get them onto the corners. Today we're going to make some loops that we will put onto the corner of our fitted sheets, and it'll help anybody that has mobility issues. If you've got arthritis or crippling pain in your hands, you can just put your hands through the loop and it'll help you pull the corner of your fitted sheet over your mattress. Hang around and I'll show you how to do this really quick project. Okay, we only need 3 things to make this project. What we want are 2 strips of fabric at the whole width of your fabric, so say 41 or 42 inches wide by 4 inches. So we want 2 pieces of fabric, and then we want some interfacing. I'm using a really lightweight interfacing. Go with the lightest weight that you have. You don't need to have much stabilizer for this at all. Just for a little bit of structure, you just want a really lightweight interfacing, or you can use this waistband interfacing, and that's what I've actually used today. So interfacing, fabric, and of course you need a bed sheet. Let's get started. So cut out 2 pieces of fabric that are 4 inches by 41 to 42 inches in length. That will give you 2 corners per strip of fabric. So we want 2 of these. What I've done is fused my interfacing onto the wrong side of the fabric here, and you can see this is still really lightweight. We don't want to have too much bulk on the corner of our beds. I've folded the fabric in half, and then I've folded the raw edges into the center, and then I folded that in half again and pressed all of that in place. So get both of your pieces of fabric, put your interfacing on, fold it in half and fold it in half again, and give yourself some nice crisp edges. Once you've done that, you can take both pieces of fabric and we'll just cut them in half. Once your fabric has been cut in half and you have strips that are about 20 to 21 inches in length, we're going to open the folds out again, bring your fabric right sides together and line up the raw edges on the end there, and we'll pin that together. Do that for all 4 pieces. So what we're doing here is making the loop for our wrists. And the reason we're sewing the ends together is so that we have the least amount of bulk in our fabric when we've created these loops and stitched them onto our bedding. Okay, we can take all 4 of these to the machine now, and all we're going to do is sew straight across that top edge there. Seam allowance is 1/4 inch. It can be whatever you want it to be, and this is really the only seam that we're going to have on our loops anyway. So just sew straight across the top of all of those 4 loops. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. Once you've sewn these raw edges, just open that out. We can finger press these seams open. So you've got your seam along the side there, and the finger press that one open. You can press it if you want to, and then bring the fabric right side out and just fold it all back in half again. So when you fold the edges in, just make sure that the seam stays open. Because we've pressed it earlier, it wants to go and fold straight back into itself. Once you've folded these side edges in with the seam open, fold that in again and flatten that all out, and we can take this to the machine and stitch closed this opening all the way around the entire loop. You don't have to do the other side. You can if you want to, but it's really not necessary. So we just want to go and sew this whole loop closed, and we'll repeat that for the others as well. So remember, just finger press your seams open, fold the edge in and the other one, and then fold those 2 edges in again, and that will neaten up the raw edges. And we'll do that for all 4 loops. Let's take it to the machine and sew the openings closed. I usually like to start in the center where that seam is, but it doesn't really matter where you start at all. I'm only going to close up the opening. I'm not going to bother stitching down the folded edge. It's really not necessary. And we'll repeat that for the others as well. With our loops closed up and the raw edges all hidden away, we're now ready to fit this to our wrist. So this is where I've got the seam just here, and I don't want to fold it in half right on the very edge of the seam because it creates too much bulk. I'm going to offset this seam by about 1 inch. There's no rule that says it has to be 1 inch at all. It can be whatever you like. So I'm just going to move it down around about 1 inch. And what that does is allows me to have the least amount of bulk here for when I sew this onto the corner of my fitted sheet. There's going to be enough bulk on the fitted sheet as it is. If you move this seam down a little bit, it actually helps distribute some of that bulk further in. The other thing that we're going to be doing is closing up some of this loop. So if I just put a clip in place for the time being, what we want to do here is create the loop strap. This will be attached to the fitted sheet. And when we pull, we want to be able to pull our hand in and then just give that a yank. That will help bring the fitted sheet underneath the mattress. Yanking it like this, if you've got arthritic fingers, that doesn't really help you so much. So you want to be able to get your wrist in. So you can see that this is the only section here that needs to be secured. And this is what we're going to do, is sew across here and then just sew these edges down. But you want to make sure you get enough room for your hand in and give that a pull. So that measures about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to put a pin in here, and I've got that seam that I've moved down. I've got the folded edge here, folded edge over here, and from this edge here I'm going to sew 1.5 inches up, across and straight back down again. And that will secure that in place, and it'll be easy for me to just put my hand in and grab that and give it a yank. By not having this open all the way down, it gives it a little bit more stability when it's stitched onto the corner of our sheet. So I'll do that for all of my pieces. I'll bring the seam down by 1 inch, and then I'll mark a pin 1.5 inches down, and that's where I'm going to sew everything closed on all 4 pieces. When I start sewing, I like to start at the folded edge here. I'll come down along the long edge there, come across, I'll backstitch it a couple of times, and then sew back to the end again. There's no need to do the end. So there we have our loop closed here. We've got our seam that we've closed earlier. That's underneath here. Everything's secured in place. And this is a section that we're going to sew onto the corner of our fitted sheet. And our wrist will just go in and grab like this. So let's grab our sheet. Now some fitted sheets will have the elastic gathered up throughout the entire sheet, and others will just have a small section on the corners. Doesn't matter which way you've got your sheets. This is the corner of the sheet that we have just here, and that's where we want to place our tabs. Take the loop, we're going to place it on the outside or the right side of our fitted sheet. Grab your strap, have the seam faced up, and what will happen is that as we stitch this on and pull it underneath our mattress, that will go to the bottom, and that seam there will be underneath the mattress and never be seen. If you don't do it like that, it really doesn't matter because this is never going to be seen under your mattress anyway. So place your loop right on that seam of your fitted sheet, and when we take this to the machine, we'll actually stretch out the elastic just so that we can sew that down without having too much bulk. And we'll repeat that for all the other corners of the fitted sheet. So find your other seam there and have your seam faced up again, line it up on the edge, and we can take this to the sewing machine now, and all we're going to do is where you've got that row of stitching here, we're just going to follow that along to meet up with the other side. Go over it and backstitch a couple of times to really secure that in place. Because you're going to be tugging this when you put the sheet onto the bed, you want to make sure that you've got that seam stitched down really well. So I will triple stitch that there, and then the job's done. Okay, we're almost finished. And I'm going to sew these down now, but I don't want to stitch over the elastic. When I sew this, I'm going to open out the elastic there, and where the stitching line is currently, there's no elastic there. If you're in doubt, then when you're stitching, come further in on the side where you know that there's no elastic at all. But I'm happy enough to just go along where the stitching line is on my fitted sheet and continue that on my little strap there. So I'll pop that under the machine and make sure I've got it lined up on that seam line, hold the fabric out, and I'll sew along that current seam line. Once you've done a couple of stitches, it's actually easier to hold the elastic apart, and then you can continue to sew. And then back stitch and forward again and finish up. So that's all done now, and when I take this to the bed and put it on, it'll actually go and sit underneath the mattress like that. Give it a good pull, make sure it's nice and strong there and that it's not going to damage your sheet. We'll go and do the other 3 corners. Okay, here we go. All 4 handles are finished. Let's go and try them out on the bed. Okay, you'll have to excuse any mess you see. This is my son's room and I don't come in here very often. Here's the sheet. I've gone and put all the other 3 corners on simply because I've got no other angle in this room to be able to film. So take the handle, and all you need to do is, if you've got mobility issues, put your hand through the loop, give it a tug, and just push that loop underneath your mattress. Simple as that. So if I take that out again, grab your loop, give it a tug and help push that down, and it'll just slide away underneath the mattress on the corner there, and nobody will ever know that you've got those little loops there to help you put your sheets on. Very quick little project. I hope this does help somebody that has problems putting their fitted sheets on the bed. I have a ton of trouble all the time, and I don't have much by the way of fingernails, but for some reason these always grab and end up splitting my nails. So it does help with that as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.